Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." Well, today we're going to focus on one part of that where Jesus said, "I am the way." He'd been speaking of his impending death and how he was going to prepare a place for the disciples and that he was going to come back and take the disciples with him. He then says, "You know the way to the place where I'm going." And Thomas says, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" So that's our introduction into Jesus as the way. What does he mean? Well, I want to offer three different understandings of how Jesus might be the way for us. First of all, Jesus is an example of the way that we should live our lives with God. I don't know if you have any particular role models. Maybe you've been struck like me by Captain Tom, who's walked a long distance in honour of his 100th birthday and raised millions of pounds for the NHS. I was delighted to hear that he's been given a gold Blue Peter badge. Only a small number of those are given out each year, and they're given out to people who are particular role models, especially to children. Well, maybe you have a role model. Maybe it's, Michelle Obama or Lionel Messi, the footballer, or the Queen or someone else. Well, I want to say the ultimate role model is Jesus. He is the way to live before and under God, the way to live a life that is sacrificial and selfless. In that way, he is the way. He's an example. Will you follow the example of Jesus? Second, Jesus is an example of someone who shows us where to go. Some years ago, when my wife Nicola and I were in Rome, we booked to go on a guided tour of the Colosseum. Now that was a smart move because having an organised tour meant we didn't have to queue up in the very long queues outside. When we joined the tour though, our guide was moving at such a pace that eventually we decided we couldn't keep up and we'd just go off on our own and have a look around. Imagine a guide that rushes off and leaves you. Well, there's no real damage done on that occasion, of course, but suppose we were in the countryside somewhere, in a place we didn't know where there was no communication or population, and we had a guide with us, and they suddenly rushed off ahead and we couldn't keep up with them. We'd think that's not a very good guide. Well, I want to say that Jesus is the best kind of guide. He knows how we can travel through this life. He wants to walk with us. He wants to make sure that where we go are the best places. And he wants to guide us in the right ways, the right choices, the right decisions, so that life can be truly fruitful and whole. Jesus is the way because he is our guide. Is he your guide? And then third, well, it might be helpful to briefly examine the Greek word that's written for what Jesus said. Of course, the New Testament was written in that ancient Greek language. And the word for way is hodos, and it has a particular meaning. Perhaps I can explain this meaning by telling a true story. Those old enough might remember this very sad story. On Friday the 6th of March 1987, the MS Herald of Free Enterprise capsized in just 90 seconds as it set sail from Zeebrugge in Belgium towards Dover. It had its bow doors still open. The disaster claimed 193 lives. Often in the midst of tragedy one finds great heroism as well. And there was one such hero who was called Andrew Parker. Andrew was 6 feet 3 inches tall, and he used that height to bridge a gap between two metal girders which allowed his wife and daughter and 20 other passengers to crawl across his back to safety. He was called the human bridge. Now the meaning of that Greek word, hodos, means literally a travelled way or a traveller's way. See, Jesus wasn't just an example, he wasn't just a guide, he was the way itself. He was the road, the pathway, the bridge to get to the Father. Humankind was helplessly cut off from relationship with God by sin, and we could do nothing to get back to God. Good works won't achieve that. Intelligence won't achieve it. Riches won't achieve it. We can do nothing. But Jesus could, and he did. He laid down his life that we might find the way back to God, so that we might travel along Jesus himself to find that way. I used to go to the Greenbelt Festival. Like many outdoor festivals, if the weather was unkind, it was a mud bath. And I remember the early years of the festival. If it rained, then it really was mud everywhere, and some parts of the site were impassable. But after a number of years, the organisers arranged to have those kind of temporary rubber-type roads put down, and then it was possible to get around. Jesus was and is the one that makes it possible to get where we need to be going, to God. He's the way to God. He's our example of how to live lives with God. He's our guide through our lives, but he's also the one who lays down his life for us so that we might journey through him, with him, to God. If you have yet to decide to take that journey, will you make a choice for Jesus today, who says, I am the way? Just offer yourself, your life, to Jesus. And if you've already made that choice, will you share that good news with others?